Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Let'sRun.com Track Talk podcast. This is Jonathan Galt. I'll be joined shortly by Let's Run co-founders Weldon and Robert Johnson. We got a new theme song, trying it out this week. Let us know what you think. I think it's an improvement on what we had in the past. The Rojos might disagree. Maybe we'll debate that. But plenty of action to talk about in the running world. We had the New York City Marathon victories for the half marathon world record holders, Joyciline Jepkosgei. Sorry, force of habit. I'm used to saying Mary Keitany wins New York. She did not win. She finished second. Joyciline Jepkosgei winning in her debut. Jeffrey Kamworor taking home the men's race. We're going to talk a lot about that. We'll take a look ahead to the Olympic marathon trials in the United States because that's the next big marathon on the schedule. We might talk about a little NCAA cross country conference recap, breeze through that pretty quickly. And we'll talk about Let'sRun.com on the road. We went to the HEPs. We went to 2 NFL games this past week. And some stuff to talk about there. So without further ado, I'll toss it over. Robert Johnson, Weldon Johnson, good to join you guys this morning.
Good to be here, John. You're still trying to give the New York City win to Mary Keitany. I mean, in our preview, I guess we should say we, because I think it went under the Let'sRun.com byline. I feel like we totally dismissed Joyciline Jepkosgei's chances. And I guess we have to say we, but I wasn't the one who really wrote most of that.
No, the byline was my byline. I'll accept it. I mean, I look, I'm just saying, who did you think was going to win the race, Weldon? Are you trying to claim that you thought she was going to beat Mary Keitany?
Can someone rewind last week's podcast? I don't know. Actually, I was reading it. My first impression when I read the article is because I thought one of our sort of criticisms of the field were they weren't that deep. And then I'm like, oh, wait, this women's field actually is not just Keitany and Aga. You got half marathon world record holder making her debut. And then you sort of went through it, and I was like, okay, she hasn't run that well in a couple of years. I mean, she's run okay, but she's nowhere near the level she was at 2 years ago, and she's delayed her marathon debut a couple times. So, yeah, I wasn't thinking she'd win.
But I agree with Weldon. I'll join Robert here joining the podcast. John had labeled his preview as a 2-horse race. I felt like that was disrespectful to the half marathon world record holder. But guys, as I join the podcast, first of all, I've got a baby to feed. I need to get a sponsor in here. If you haven't been to the Let'sRun.com shoe site, you need to go there now. Let'sRun.com/shoes. We have the best reviews. We have the best prices. So even if you're not looking for shoes right now, you need to go there and review your shoe to help others out. And then just get in the habit of going there maybe once a month. So when you do get a shoe, you buy it, we make money, and the baby eats. But guys, we probably should have some – John, how are you doing? Weldon has not asked emotionally how you're doing. I know it was a big, disastrous week for you. Not only did you butcher the women's preview and your writing for your employers here, but the New England Patriots have lost. I took you to the game, and they were beaten down by my Baltimore Ravens. And then, or actually, a few days before that, probably the biggest disappointment of your lifetime in terms of running, the Dartmouth Big Green getting double last places at the Ivy League Championships, and you were there in attendance.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't all bad. We'd had 2 positives. Brighton and Hove Albion beat Norwich City on Saturday morning, and then the Dartmouth football team beat Harvard in a Hail Mary, setting up an epic, undefeated showdown between Dartmouth and Princeton next week in Yankee Stadium. So there are a couple small victories. Also, England lost the Rugby World Cup final, which I got up at 5 a.m. to watch, so that was disappointing. But yeah, look, Robert's trying to freak out here. He's like, oh my God, the Patriots lost a game. It's the end of the world. It's like, look, the Patriots lost 5 games last year and still ended up winning the Super Bowl. They lost to Tennessee. They lost to Detroit. I mean, they lost to a good team on the road. They looked a little unprepared for Lamar Jackson, the Ravens rushing attack, but I'm not panicking. He's going to figure this stuff out. And then Robert's calling it my Baltimore Ravens. I mean, look, Robert, thank you for taking me to the game. I had a great time, even though we lost. But Robert claiming my Baltimore Ravens, I mean, you're a Cowboys fan. And to watch Robert dancing and jumping for joy when the Ravens would score touchdowns, frankly, was fairly embarrassing for someone who considers himself a Cowboys fan. I just thought it was ridiculous.
I may try to find the audio from our conference call. We started taping it at the end, but John totally said that Robert was an embarrassment at the game, like acting like a little kid in the stands. But I really do. I am a little worried about John's mental well-being. We don't have a mental health. We don't have that support at Let's Run. And it slowly started to sort of, your life sort of unravels, I think, in sort of slow phases. And at first, with Deadspin sort of fell apart this week, and John and I were talking about that a lot. So then John and I stood in front of the Trump Tower, and I said, John, we're supposed to talk less about sports. So I turned on the recorder and said, John, let's go. Hot take on Trump. And he just wasn't ready. And journalism nowadays, it's just not about sports, John. So you got to be ready for that. Then, we're a pretty tight crew here at Let's Run, and we're doing a lot of stuff on the weekend. And like John went to an event. There's a new company called Fourth Frontier that Paula Radcliffe is involved with. And it's a product that you can measure. It's supposed to measure effort by
breathing rate.
And there's science behind this. It's crazy. Like essentially, like everyone's done heart rate monitoring or GPS in the past. And I personally think that's a faulty measure of effort. You really want to learn effort. And they're saying that breathing is the way to do it. But anyway, we go to this event. And then Saturday night, we run down to the Hoka pop-up store and the Tracksmith pop-up store. And we're going to dinner afterwards. And there's just no John. And England had lost the World Cup that day. And I'm just worried that he was in a dark spot. Then the marathon happens. Then the Ravens happen. And John, you look good. Just keep the head up. The Deadspin editor's been fired, so maybe you can take over there.
I know I feel like you guys are trying to force me out. My excuse for Saturday is I got up at 5 a.m. to watch the game. It ended around 7. Then I had to cover the 5K, and my nose was runny the whole day. And then I watched Brighton play Norwich and beat Norwich. And by that point, I was just exhausted. And I had plans to meet up with my friends in New York, who I don't get to see very often. So I decided I was going to take a nap. I ended up missing dinner with you guys. I'm sorry. I know that my presence, my witticisms were probably missed at dinner, but I ended up being able to see my friends and get some drinks. I think it was a good trade-off, and I felt well rested.
Jonathan, I appreciate you for being nice. Even Weldon's wife said it best. She's like, why would a 28-year-old guy want to hang out with a bunch of 45-year-olds? Weldon doesn't understand that. So
no, I like, don't get me wrong. I like hanging out with you guys, but I had a friend in New York I get to see once a year, and he wanted to grab beers on Saturday. So I grabbed beers with him. That's what we do.
Yeah. So now the truth comes out. John was asleep. His phone was off. No. I needed to sleep so that I could go out there and get beers. Otherwise, I would have been falling asleep at like 9 o'clock, like Rojo. Did you hear the other words he said? He said he had to cover the 5K. So people, if you want to work for Let's Run and don't want to have to do something, there might be an opening coming up soon.
It's my job. I covered the 5K. Weldon was showing up like halfway through the race. I mean, come on, man.
So if you want to apply for that job, you can actually call and apply. I get so many emails, I don't really read them. 844-538-7786. That's 844-LETS-RUN. I actually did hire John because he just kept pestering me. John, was that via email or were you actually calling me?
I would email you, and then when you wouldn't email me back, I'd call you up on the phone.
Yeah, see? And I'm like, this guy's persistent. It's very good. So I do need a ruling, guys. So if you're a regular listener of the podcast, perhaps we'll give them that page where they can send, or you can just email us.
Yeah, letsrun.com/podcast. You can give your feedback. We're going to have some feedback actually later in the podcast. Thinking of that, Robert.
I need a ruling. Am I allowed to use the tip jar? I don't know if actually any money has come in on that, but I would like to take the money that was designed for John and instead take that for myself. I mean, I spent it hundreds of dollars on the Ravens tickets for John. I made some mistakes and just kept waiting, thinking the prices would go down and down and down, and they went up and up and up. And we were 2 minutes outside the stadium before the game started, and I had to purchase them for about $700.
Absolutely not. That's probably like a crime or something. John, I forgot. A monthly subscriber has donated now. Before, people were giving like $10 or $20 one off, but you have your first subscription.
Oh, this is awesome. And at some point, I assume I'm going to see some of this money, because right now I have no idea how much is in the tip jar and haven't been paid out of it. Wait, also, we and Robert were not the only people to go to an NFL game this weekend, though. Weldon went to MetLife Stadium to see his Cowboys beat the Giants. And the big story out of this, Weldon did not see the Monday Night Football cat. There was a cat on the field. He was running wild into the end zone. Weldon was out getting beers. He missed the biggest play of the night.
I mean, I saw it on the screen, but I didn't realize that the cat went into the end zone. We were sitting right on the end zone. It was a great environment. I love the Giants game. There are a lot of Cowboys fans there, but the Giants fans had their white towels. I guess they still want to beat the Cowboys. They're not defeated like the Jets fans, and great atmosphere. Chris Weiler, I understand, is a season ticket holder, NYR media guy. Chris, keep your head up. But I had a great time. It's way more better. There you go.
Ivy League education.
And Jerry World. Thought the atmosphere was better. I mean, Jerry World might be better now that the Cowboys are better, but I've only been to one game ever at the Cowboys Stadium, and that was when they were terrible. So I had a great time. I'll give a plug out to FanDuel. Sports betting is legal in New Jersey. I'm not a big bettor, but it said your first bet is free, so I took advantage of that. People, read the fine print. If you actually go to New Jersey and do this, if you lose the bet, there's some conditions that you have to make another bet to get the money back. But if you do it smart, you're going to get your money back. But my bet won, so all in all, a very good day for me.
And that was your New York City Marathon recap. So let's move on. No, let's talk a little bit about races. We gave credit, Joyciline Jepkosgei. I mean, to me, I was blown away by this. I know she's the half marathon world record holder, but as we said, she hadn't really been racing that well last couple years, compared to her standard of 2017 when she broke the half marathon world record. And earlier this year, she was supposed to debut in London, supposed to debut in Hamburg, and then she pops up in London and she's pacing the elite women there. So that was kind of confusing. But she shows up and she just destroys Mary Keitany in Central Park, which, for someone to do that in their debut marathon, so she was the first debut winner in New York since Tegla Rupp in 1994. For someone to do that in their first marathon and destroy Mary Keitany, one of the great marathoners of all time, I was incredibly impressed. Tegla Rupp, sorry. Is it LaRoupe or LaRoupe? I should know. We've gotten criticism in recent weeks for not being able to pronounce Shalane Flanagan's name correctly. I'm sorry if I'm disrespecting another running legend.
Wow, that shows John's age a little bit. There was some debate, but I always said Tegla LaRoupe.
Okay. Anything else to add on Jepkosgei's win or, women's race? We got Des Linden finishing as the top American in 6th place.
I'm going to take a different take than you, John. I wasn't incredibly impressed by anything about that women's race. I thought that I know that it was the second fastest time in New York City marathon history, but what was the first half, John? What did they hit halfway in here?
I'm just going to pull up her splits here.
I just thought that look at what Keitany ran in her build-up.
Halfway was 1:11:39.
Keitany, excuse me. But they go out in 71:39, so that's 2:32 low pace. The course record is what? She missed it by 15 seconds?
Actually 2:23 pace, Robert. But
yeah, so all they have, what do they need for the second half?
They would have needed a 70 something.
Yeah, if Keitany's in her prime, she destroys that course record. And I figured out what they needed for the final 10K. They needed to average about 5:23 pace, I think it was. They couldn't even do that. I just think that Keitany ran 67:58 at basically 68 minutes at the Great North Run. She was only 4th in that race. This was not even anywhere close to a Keitany, in my opinion. This was Keitany, a shadow of her older self. And yes, Jepkosgei beat her, and she ran fairly fast for New York. But I don't think that these women are wearing, with the new shoes and everything like that. Obviously, they're Adidas athletes, so they're not wearing the Vaporflies. But I just don't think that this was an amazing race. This is the second best showing fitness-wise I've ever seen in New York City history. I would have thought that Keitany in a prime going out that fast would destroy the course record.
I think Weldon's head's going to explode here if you mispronounce Keitany one more time. But Weldon, go ahead.
I sort of agree because, it's the second fastest winning time ever in New York, so you should be super impressed. But Bridget Koskei ran 2:14 in Chicago, 3 weeks ago? So the bar has been raised. I think they can run sub 220 in New York. That's what I would like to see for the 50th anniversary. We can talk about the 50th anniversary next year later. But at the end of that race, I didn't think, wow, this was the greatest New York women's race ever. I thought they were going to get their record if they really picked it up. Maybe I really should be impressed with a 16-year-old record that's still there. But I kind of was like Robert. I think Keitany's a little bit off her game now. It's a tremendous debut for Jepkosgei, right? But let's just see what happens, what she can do in a faster course.
I just think winning's the name of the game. That's what Jepkosgei did. She almost broke the course record. Rudy Aga, she was 3rd place. She won Tokyo earlier this year. She ran 2:18 in Berlin last year. I guess your argument is just these women aren't as fit as they were when they ran these other times. But to To me, 222 in New York in your debut is pretty damn good.
Yeah, but I mean, year preview said a 2-horse race, and obviously one of those wasn't Jepkosgei. But if one of those 2 horses, Katani, isn't necessarily in that great a form, Og isn't that great. I mean, 225 is third. It's an honestly paced race, and only 2 women can break 225. I know it's hilly. Subtract 2 minutes from the time. That's just shocking in this day and age to me. When the world record is 214.
Yeah, but no other woman's come like 214, and then the next closest active woman is 217. I mean, Bridget Kosgei isn't in the race. You're not going to have anyone coming close to 214.
Fair enough. Let's talk about the American women. And I said I wasn't impressed by anything in this race. I was impressed by Des. I liked how she went out hard, was running her own race, and was aggressive. I've sort of, we've been debating in recent months about whether she's going to do the trials. And I kind of thought like, oh, she's just going to cash her paychecks. And maybe that's me just being cynical. To me, I was very inspired by this performance. I watched her and I'm like, she's obviously loves training. She loves to compete. So if she doesn't do the Olympic trials or whatever, it's not because she just wants to get paid in Boston. It's just because the Olympics, she's been there, done that, and has other, goals that she's more focused on, or maybe they're slightly more lucrative, whatever. That's fine. I was very impressed by her. I thought she looked good. I thought she, in the post-race interview that I did with her, I was really, I don't know. She's like, look, I'm at a stage in my career where you just swing away, swing for the fences. Like she's got nothing to lose. And I love that attitude. But then I asked her to give herself a grade. She says B-. So she was a harsh grader on herself. So I was impressed by just after seeing that, I would not be surprised if we do see her on the Olympic trials on February 29th.
I'd really like to see her run it. And I think the one thing, you look at the results, and on paper you have Des Linden 226.46, and then second American, Kellen Taylor right behind her 226.52. So only 6 seconds back. And you guys are...
John has mentioned Kalen Taylor's name on the podcast. Well, then can we get a little golf clap?
You guys are probably going to get mad at me for discrediting her now, but I do think that at the trials, that gap could be larger, and here's why. Des ran very aggressively early on. She said she wanted to go after the American course record, and she realized that the second half she was running out of gas and slowing down, and that's not normally how Des runs. And in a trials race where she just has to finish top 3, I do expect Des to run a more conservative race and close stronger and have more at the end. So you could see that gap grow, but obviously this was a good race. I mean, seventh for Kellen Taylor, 7th place is good. Being that close to Des is good. And I've said for the last few weeks, not always, but I've said for the last few weeks she's a contender at the trials. I still believe that about Kellen Taylor. And there was one other woman, there are a couple other Americans in the field we should mention. Alafine Tuliamuk, she finished 12th in 228.12. And then Roberta Groner, really impressive turnaround from Worlds. She finishes 13th in 230.12. That's only a minute off her PR, so congrats to her. But Sarah Hall, she was the other one that we thought could have a chance to be top American. She wound up dropping out. She had stomach issues. It didn't sound like from her explanation that the quick turnaround from Berlin had that much to do with it. And honestly, I don't know. Are you guys worried by this result about Sarah Hall dropping out? Because I'm really not.
I was initially going to, I had some hot takes for the week, and my biggest losers of the week this week were indeed Sarah Hall for the women and Andy Bayer for the men. That's U.S. men's steeplechaser. Kind of a strange hot take. I'll get to that later. But 222, she's at a new level. You expect to see her well. She was running the lead pack, but now that it's come out, she's just spoken to Joe Battaglia at length. She was very sick the day before with her stomach. I'm not worried about it. The fact that she was able to run in that lead pack for whatever it was, 15 miles, no, I'm not worried about it.
I'm not worried either. I mean, she was it was like a bonus run, I feel like. Not feeling well, called it a day early. It doesn't mean that much. John, you're supposed to say 41-year-old Roberta Groner, who has a full-time job as well.
Mother of 3, don't forget that.
Oh, yeah, mother of 3 as well. It's like it's supposed to be real quickly. Like Roberta Groner, mother of 3, Roberta Groner, 41 years old, full-time nurse, who got 6 of the Worlds less than a month ago. Or actually, her race was the first week of the World, so that was over a month ago. But that's nuts. And then she almost PRs in New York. I mean, what a week for her. I mean, she's not making the Olympic team. 0% chance. You guys agree?
Yes.
Yes.
But I'm 46. I'm a father of one. I barely have a job. I work whenever I want to. And I'm just kidding. I mean, but I have a flexible job. Father of one. We have someone taking care of the children, and I can't even run 3 miles a day. She's running like 3 marathons a year and at elite level, let alone at my 5-hour level. So props to Groner. But back to Sarah Hall. I'm not worried about her performance, but I don't have any faith. I don't have any confidence in her like I do. I mean, it's like, you know what you're going to get from a Des Linden. You know what I'm saying? You know what you're going to get from, well, actually, you don't know. A lot of these other women, you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah, here's the thing. If you're comparing people on what you're going to get to Des Linden, who's one of the most consistent marathoners of all time, well, yeah, Des is obviously going to be more consistent than anyone you stack her up against.
And I guess Sarah, I was a little worried about Sarah on a difficult course, but she has won a U.S. cross title before. She has won the New York Mini 10K. So maybe I shouldn't be worried about that, but she did the fast flat marathon. The trials course is going to be very difficult. That's one thing from talking about the athletes. Jared Ward, Des, others are like, well, New York is going to prepare you for the trials course a little bit, but they all said the trials course is way harder than New York. So that's something to factor in.
Since we're talking about the U.S. women now, let's break down the Olympic trials. That will be the next big race for the U.S. marathoners. I mean, I think Tokyo and Dubai will happen before that. But from a U.S. perspective, all focus is now on February 29th. Not much is going to change between now and then. There could be a DNS due to an injury. Maybe someone has a great build-up race that makes us think that they have a little bit better shot than normal. But Jonathan Gault is preparing these articles. They'll be published soon, John, where you break down the U.S. women's chances and the break down the men's chances. How do you see the women's field right now? It looks like you've got 4 or 5 women that you view as the best people. Just break it down for us.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a few tiers here. I've got 3 tiers, and you can sort of debate. The women, it's a lot less clear-cut than the men. The men, I feel like the tiers are fairly obvious. The women, I don't think it's quite the same. But here's what I've got in tier 1. Jordan Hsay, Emily Sisson, Des Linden, Amy Cragg, Molly Huddle. Then tier 2, I have Sarah Hall, Kellen Taylor, Sally Kipyego. Tier 3, Emma Bates, Alafine Tuliamuk, Stephanie Bruce, Laura Thweet. And then if your name's not on one of those lists, you're in tier 4. Do you guys have any disagreements?
Yeah, who's your tier 2 again?
Sarah Hall, Kellen Taylor, and Sally Kipyego.
Tier 1, please.
Tier 1 is Jordan Hsay, Emily Sisson, Des Linden, Amy Cragg, Molly Huddle.
I sort of agree. I think some people might want to push Sarah Hall up a tier. Kipyego, because of her pedigree, might want to be pushed up a tier. But I guess your tier 2 is pretty good. So the women's, there's a lot more strong contenders on paper. I think the men's race, I mean, obviously the third spot's kind of up in the grabs, but I think you're going to have most people probably say the men's people are going to come from 5 or 6 guys, whereas the women, you're over 10 people there, right?
Yeah, there's 11 people on that list. So, John, I think that the women's race is fascinating. It's really impossible to break down because Jordan Hsay has been amazing when she's healthy, but, when has she been healthy? Emily Sisson, she looked fantastic in London, but I was very disappointed in her track season. Des Linden, very consistent, but we're not even sure if she's doing the trials. Amy Cragg, when's the last time she ran a marathon, John?
February 2018.
Okay, so I know she's won a medal before at Worlds, but I'm supposed to be confident in that. Molly Huddle did run well in London. I was expecting a lot more than that. I thought that, I thought that she ran – I was surprised that she beat those people at Worlds, right? I mean, she beat Sisson at Worlds. But was she running the half marathon last week? Not impressive at all in Valencia.
69 minutes, yeah.
I mean, I feel like she's not proven as a marathoner, and I just think she may be on the downside of her career. I would put Sarah Hall. I mean, she's run 2:22, but Sarah Hall, I don't have any faith in her consistency. Sarah Hall is coming on. I think. It's weird. If all those women are on their game, I think Hall is right with them. It's really hard. And then I think Kellen Taylor is consistent. I just think she's a low layer below those other women in terms of top performances, in terms of their life. Kipyego obviously has been really good in the past. And then I think those other women sort of need a lot of help to make the team.
Yeah, the way I see it is I think anyone from the top 2 tiers, I wouldn't be surprised if they made the team. And tier 1 I essentially put together was people who have done something really special either in the marathon or in the case of Molly Huddle, she has a very long run on the track as one of the best in America. Sally Kipyego, obviously, she trumps all of them when it comes to track career. She's got 2 silver medals from Worlds and the Olympics, but she's also she's been hurt for a while, and she did run 2:25 in Berlin this fall, but prior to that, she had very little to hang her hat on in the past few years. I do think she's really a very intriguing prospect going into the trials. But anyone from those top 2 tiers, I wouldn't be surprised by. If you're in tier 3 or below, so that would be Emma Bates, Aliphine Tuliamuk, Stephanie Bruce, Laura Thweatt, or anyone else not named so far, I would be surprised if those people made it on the team. Not because they're bad runners, but just look at the people in the top 2 tiers. That's pretty much eight studs that you have to beat at least 6 of them to make it on the team. I mean, it's going to be tough.
I mean, Sisson gets tier 1. She's run 2:23. Hall gets tier 2. She's run 2:22.
Yeah, but Sisson's also run 67 minutes and a half. She's made teams on the track. I mean, I just think her pedigree is high. I know that Sarah Hall 2:22 is faster than 2:23, but I think Emily Sisson's pedigree as a distance runner is higher than Sarah Hall's.
Agreed.
I kind of think that Emma Bates needs to be. I mean, I think her odds are definitely higher than a Bruce. Are you guys aware? I don't think many people are because of the 2:4 team, but this is shocking to me. Emma Bates was 4th in the Chicago Marathon just a few weeks ago. Now, that was 2:25, so admittedly she's 11 minutes behind the winner, but that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, can we stop comparing people to Bridget Kosgei? I mean, it serves no purpose. No one's close to 2:14 in the women's marathon right now.
John just wants us to ignore facts. I thought this is the era of facts, or is it fake news?
I'm just saying, what purpose does it serve saying, oh, she's 11 minutes behind the winner? It's like, well, yeah, no one's close to Bridget Kosgei. That's not really, it doesn't really make sense to compare people to that.
Now, do you guys want to go straight to the U.S. men's Olympic trials, or do we need to talk about the New York City men's race first?
Yeah, let's talk about New York a little bit. I mean, I was not surprised by Jeffrey Kamworor's win. In fact, you guys gave me crap for my women's preview. I picked on Twitter right before the race. I made my picks for the races. I picked Jeffrey Kamworor. I hyped him up in the men's preview. Perhaps it wasn't a huge shock considering we already saw he was super fit in Copenhagen. He ran a half marathon world record of 58:01 in September, but he looked fantastic. He won it very similar to his 2017 victory in New York, except he closed even faster this time and ran 2 minutes faster for a winning time. And his 24th mile just blew me away. I mean, he made several surges sort of after 20 miles, but that 24th mile is a 50-foot elevation gain, and he just smoked everyone on it. He ran it in 4:40. That really just cemented at the field. And watching him run through Central Park, just his powerful stride flowing, it was just a beautiful sight. I was watching it. I just thought how lucky I was to be able to witness that, which is not something I feel a lot watching major marathons. So that was really fun. And yeah, I mean, total stud. And I think he has a decision to make now about whether he runs the 10K or tries to run the marathon at the Olympics next year.
Yeah, it's an interesting decision. I mean, this year he didn't run the 10,000 at Worlds. And I was talking to Patrick Sang, his coach, after the race, and I was like, well, did this make it easier that you didn't have to worry about the 10,000 this year? You just got ready for the marathon. Do you think that's why, clearly he was fitter than 2017 when he did win in New York? And I put this in a recap. It's not clear that he was actually fitter than 2016 and 18 when he lost, because those were some really impressive finishes that year despite not winning.
2015 and 2018.
Yeah. But Sang's like, well, what do you mean? We did have the 10,000. Like, they did run the 10,000 at the Kenyan trials. He won it. He beat a guy who ended up medaling at Worlds. So his agent, Valentin Trau, told me, he's like, yeah, it might make more sense just logically to do one more sort of like 10,000 half marathon type thing. And then before focusing on the marathon. But he's like, also at the same time, and then also if you do the 10,000, it might make it easier to come back and defend your New York City crown, right? You don't have to run 2 marathons in the span of a few months. So that logically seems to be the thing to do. But, also he's like, but maybe Jeffrey at this race is going to feel like he's really a marathoner now. He's all in on the marathon. And if he's more confident in that, I feel like they're going to let him do whatever he wants to do.
Here's what we need. Eliud Kipchoge, if you're listening to this, you can't retire before racing Jeffrey Kamworor in a marathon again. I don't want Eliud to go to Tokyo, win the gold, and then retire and he doesn't get to face Kamworor. I mean, can you imagine the hype we could generate if we had Kamworor versus Kipchoge versus Bekele in London this spring? I think that the British tabloids would explode with that, and Mo Farah as well. I mean, oh my God, I'm like drooling just thinking about it right now. So I kind of think the most exciting thing would be for Kamworor to run the marathon. But I agree. Well, Robert, I kind of get the sense that he might do the 10K next year.
Wait. Was Farah would you have him rabbiting that race, John, or about halfway? Or
wow, one bad race in Chicago, and you guys just write him off.
In terms of Kamworor, I think it's more exciting if he runs the 10,000 at the Olympics. He hasn't run a fast marathon, so maybe he needs to go to London and try to blast one. But I think the way people are perceived in the sport a lot of times, it's like if they're super fast, whatever. If he goes to Sapporo, what we're supposed to say now, and raises Kipchoge, I guess it's cool. But I love the guys who have like the 10,000 meter gold. He's got the cross country gold. He has the World Half Marathon gold. But I feel like this is his final chance to get a track gold. It's the one thing missing on his resume. He's already won the New York City Marathon. I'm sure he'll be at the 20, or very likely could be at that's the thing with the Olympics. But he very likely could be at the 2024 Olympic Marathon, maybe the 2028 Olympic Marathon. But there will be no more track Olympics 100% for him. So I'm tempted to see if he can try to knock that one off. And if he pulls that off and then later gets marathon glory at everything, his pedigree to me is even better than. But I guess if he won the Olympics this time around and beats Kipchoge, but that's a tall order.
Yeah, actually, you're sort of convincing me now, Weldon, that the 10K might be the right choice for him. I still would. I mean, I'd love to see him run London, but 10K in Olympics would be awesome. But the one thing, Weldon, are we forgetting? I thought he already earned GOAT status just by winning New York. The winner of the New York City Marathon's the greatest runner of all time. So therefore, he won New York. He's the greatest of all time. Is that not true?
Thank you, John.
Like, can you go down the streets of Fifth Avenue in New York today and just ask people, like, tell me who won the New York City Marathon on Sunday? How many do you think could actually tell you?
Thank you, John, for acknowledging the greatness. Yes, the New York City Marathon champion, now that I'm a resident here, is the greatest runner of all time. It's a good question. John, I started recording my doorman yesterday about the New York City Marathon.
Does he know you're recording him, Weldon?
Yeah, I started filming him. Problem was I didn't hit record, so he's like, oh, good, I got left off the hook. Because he's like, why do the Americans even bother, man? African guys win. And I'm like, what country from Africa? He goes, I don't know. And he's like, I'm not looking good, am I?
It also disproves your point. Shalane won 2 years ago. You're like, oh, everyone knows Shalane. She won the race. He doesn't even know an American won 2 years ago.
I then said, hey, have you heard of Shalane Flanagan? He said, oh, yeah, I've heard of her. And I go, well, she's an American. She won. He goes, yeah, that was a long time ago, right? And I'm like, no, 2 years ago. And this guy's a big sports fan. We said we were going to do man on the street interviews and sort of ask people like who's going to win this year or who won. We should definitely do that next year. I'm convinced New York City Marathon, best weekend of the year in New York. Marathon Sunday, maybe in every city, but there's this like humanity that comes about and everybody is super kind to one another just in general. My friend Richard, training partner from Fort Worth, was here for the marathon. Did you guys know that Michelob Ultra like flew out 95 people to run the marathon?
Not until you told me this yesterday.
He got selected, free trip, everything. Anyway.
That's in honor of their 95 calories in their beer, folks.
Yeah, free plug. Actually, let's start talking sponsors. We need an official beer of Let'sRun.com. How about a beer that's sort of light and hoppy with some taste? We'll tag it. You'll put Let's Run on the bottles. Like maybe some money will go to Let's Run. Some will go to charity. The official beer of Let'sRun.com and runners everywhere. How's that for a tag? But anyway, Richard was saying, because being from Texas like myself, he was saying, hey, New Yorkers, they're actually kind of nice, because the stereotype is New Yorkers are very rude. And New Yorkers are very nice. Robert had his bag open on the subway and a woman said, hey, your bag's open. And then I said to Richard, wait a second, were you wearing the marathon poncho around? He said, yes. I go, well, that doesn't count. If you're wearing a marathon poncho around at any town, people are going to be like, hey, man, great job. And a shout out to Ben Rosario. He said Ben Rosario told him, this is Hoka NAZ elite coach, Ben Rosario, said, great job, man. So Ben Rosario being nice to strangers on the street. You never know people when you should be nice to strangers, because it meant a lot to a guy who knew who Ben Rosario was. And Ben had no idea that this guy knew who he was. So shout out to Ben.
Well, Ben's just nice in general. So, I think he's going to be nice no matter if you're wearing a poncho or not.
Guys, we're not going to have to hear this New York love fest from Weldon for much longer. I have breaking news to report. He'll be moving out to the burbs. Weldon will be now supporting Connecticut, the home of his alma mater. He'll be moving there in December, so hopefully he will stop this nonstop New York praise from start to finish. But let's talk about Kamworor, John. You said you can't wait for London. Why do we need to see Kamworor at London? What is he going to do there except get absolutely smoked? It's amazing to me. Kamworor is only 26 years of age. He's done so much in the half marathon. He's done so much in cross country, but he's been running marathons since 2012. He's run 9 marathons in his career, John. The fastest marathon of his career. This is amazing considering the Vaporfly technology has come out. The fastest marathon of his career was his very first marathon, 2:06:12. I would love to see Kamworor, Bekele, Kipchoge, all those guys. What I would really love to see is them on a championship-style course, either the Olympics or New York City next year. I would go baba over that. I would think Kamworor might have a shot if it's a hilly race, given his cross-country background. Bekele, I think, would eat up that New York course with the hills. And I don't know what Kipchoge can do on a hilly course. I know if we go to London, we know who the best time trialer is. It's probably Kipchoge. If not him, then Bekele. But I guess you can say Kamworor is like more than 10 years younger than these guys. But I don't know. I mean, I hope that we do get it in London.
Well, yes, Kipchoge is going to win most likely. But Robert, your argument that he hasn't come fast has so many holes in it. I don't even know where to start. I mean, do you know? Have you heard of a concept called context? Where has Geoffrey Kamworor run his last 4 marathons? New York, New York, New York, New York. He's run 2:06 in New York. That's pretty damn fast. I mean, he hasn't run a fast course since Berlin in 2014 when he was 21 years old. So I think he can run a bit faster than 2:06. And one of the reasons I'd like to see him run London is the dude just ran a 58:01 half. I'd like to see how fast he could go. The argument that he hasn't run fast, I mean, come on, man. You know better than that.
Wow. Actually, Weldon, can you go back and delete that segment? That hot take of mine, I admit now is really bad, actually. 2:06 last year in New York, so you're going to subtract 2 minutes, so he's 2:04.
And now he's got the super Vaporflies now.
It actually reminds me of the Cowboys. I heard yesterday Colin Cowherd on the radio on Fox Sports 1 or Fox Sports Radio, whichever way you listen to it. He ranked the Cowboys 4th best football team in the NFL. I'm like, this is a joke. I'm a Cowboys fan. They've beaten absolutely. It's the opposite of Kamworor. Like, yeah, 2:06 in New York is actually pretty fast. When you're 5-3 and 4 of your wins are against Miami, the Giants twice, and then Washington once, you basically haven't beaten anybody except for Philadelphia. So, John, I gave you crap earlier, but you have put me in my place. I apologize to the Let's Run fans. My first mistake, and we've been doing this for how many months? I mean, we've been doing this for probably 40 podcasts.
That's the dynamic everyone loves about Let'sRun.com. Robert says something inflammatory. I come in and fact check him. It's a little back and forth. The Cowherd Cowboy statement is so ridiculous. I'm not even going to dignify it with a response. It's just ludicrous. Let's talk about some other guys in the New York City field, apart from Geoffrey Kamworor. We had Albert Correa second, 2:08. Goma Bekele Gebre, the citizen runner. Well, I don't know if we call him a citizen runner or not. That's Yuki Koichi's title, but he had to pay his own entry. Did not start from the elite start. He finished his third in 2:08:38. That's a big PR for him. About 5 minutes, he had come in with 2:13 from Pittsburgh. That was incredible. Then Jared Ward, very consistent. He's turning into maybe the Des Linden of the men's side. 2:10:45 for 6th. That is the fastest time by American in New York since 2011. And then a couple really impressive runs from guys way on the different ends of the age spectrum. We have Abdi Abdirahman running 2:11:34. That's a U.S. Masters record. Breaks Bernard Lagat's record from earlier this summer. He finishes 9th. And then Connor McMillan, who was in diapers when Abdi was running at the University of Arizona in college, he runs 2:12:07 for 10th place. It's not his debut. He ran one when he was in college, but it was sort of not totally serious. But his first professional marathon, really impressive. And Ed Eyestone, he's only 23 years old. So the joke was on Twitter afterwards, Ed Eyestone said he enjoyed that people were talking about how young a BY athlete was for a change, which I got a kick out of. So some pretty impressive performances by those guys.
Some nice humor there by Ed Eyestone. Yeah, going in Central Park when those guys are running, and it's Kamworor, Albert Career, and Gerda Gebra. We sort of got the result we knew was going to happen. When it's going on, you're not actually certain of it, but Kamworor just, I guess I say he destroyed them, but he only beat Career by 23 seconds. But the pedigrees of those guys aren't even close. I mean, the top New York this year essentially was the top 4 from last year, and then some fillers. And we sort of said, look, there aren't enough filling guys in the field, which sort of proved to be the case. But it made an interesting run. I mean, good run by Career. Gerda Gebra, great. I mean, that's just like the sort of story people love. You pay your own entry. They put you in the second corral. You say, screw that. You go out and get third place and win $60,000. Tremendous.
Yeah, I mean, when was the last time an unsponsored athlete without an agent finished third in a world marathon major? I guess it was probably Sarah Sellers, 2018 Boston, but this wasn't like we didn't have ridiculous weather conditions in this race. This was a pretty normal race, and he ran great. And some of the guys they brought in, Tamarat Toller, and particularly Shira Katada, who was second last year and also second in London last year. He was only fifth in 2:10. I was kind of expecting more from him.
Well, how about Elisa DeCisa? I know he won Worlds less than a month later, but he didn't even bother to go to the 5. John noticed this. He doesn't even bother to pick up his bottle at the 5K aid station. So we heard in the mix in the media zone that his agent had to beg him to get on the plane just to go to New York. Clearly, I mean, when you're not going to your water bottle at 5K, clearly you're dropping out. I mean, maybe he started and thought, oh, maybe I'll see how I feel, but wouldn't you at least give it a run for more than 5K to figure that out, whether you're going to drop or not? But yeah, the Gebra story was really sort of amazing, in the sense of we said, like, look, New York doesn't want to bring in 10 East Africans. They don't want the 10th place guy to be East African. They like to have a good race up front, but they like the human interest stories, sort of, 2 Americans were in the top 10 and an Australian as well and an Irishman. But they're kind of playing a game of a little risky here, Russian roulette. I mean, if you water down the fields too much and if it's not deep enough, you're going to have guys like Gebra who realize, hey, if I can run 2:10, there's a $10,000 bonus for breaking 2:10. So, and I'll finish at least 5th place. He ended up doing better than that and making $55,000.
$60,000, in fact.
Pretty interesting stuff. And after the race, I was wondering myself, I was like, wait a minute. We said there's only 4 guys in this field under 208. And I thought to myself, wait, how many people do you need to be an IAAF gold level race? I feel like New York's not going to hit this criteria. So I Google around, I find an IAAF document, and it says you have to have 6 runners ranked in the top 150 in the world to qualify. And here are the rankings of the runners heading. Now, these are the rankings as of December 4th of last year. But even if you looked them up currently, they would have only been 5 runners ranked in the top 150 in the world. Tamarat Toller was 5th, Elisa DeCisa 31st, Shira Katada 6th, Jeffrey Kamworor 28th, Albert Career 39th. And then if you drop the next 2 highest ranked places were Stephen Sambu of Kenya and Arne Gabius of Germany. They're both in the 160s. So I wrote the IAAF and I was like, it looks like New York is going to lose its gold label status. And they wrote back and said, oh no, the document you're looking at is actually we changed it. That was a tentative thing, but we changed it and said that to be gold level status, you just need 6 out of the top 200. So they made a gold level runner. Anyone who's ranked in the top 200 at the end of this year, you need 6 of those runners in your race for next year to get that status. So New York does qualify, but just barely.
Well, I think some of those rankings show just how in the marathon, at least, the rankings, it's not really a true reflection of who the top runners are because there's just such a limited body of work. I mean, Jeffrey Kamworor only runs 1 marathon a year. He's definitely one of the top 10 marathoners in the world. DeCisa, same thing. I mean, maybe the World Championship hasn't been factored in yet. But I think the bigger picture of, a couple more guys to bring up the depth should be good. The World Marathon Majors, if they're going to have this special status for the Olympics, they need to have an even higher standard. And there's talk of expansion of the World Marathon Majors, which would dilute them even further. So do we want to go there actually a little bit? John, do you know what cities are up for expansion in the World Marathon Majors?
I'm going to guess somewhere in China and maybe Singapore as well.
Okay. Why would you say those?
Well, isn't Wanda one of the sponsors of the World Marathon Majors now?
Actually, that's actually dead on. So I posed this question to Robert, and he's like, "Oh, it'll be in Asia. That's where the money is." And people there really care about status. And so you guys are kind of on this same train of thought. But they had these signs up at the marathon, the little billboard, and it was talking about Wanda and potential expansion. And so a couple things, and I find this interesting, and I think we need to look into this a bit more. So Wanda, which now is a Chinese conglomerate, second richest man in China owns it. They now own the Ironman triathlons. They now own the rock and roll marathons. And they now have a 10-year sponsorship agreement with the World Marathon Majors.
And they're going to be the title sponsor of the Diamond League beginning next year. There's a second Diamond League coming to China in addition to Shanghai.
Yeah, so Wanda sort of, in addition to being conglomerate, it's like super involved with, sport. So there's a little thing, and this has come out. You kind of ignore it when you hear it. You don't think much of it. But it says the standard chartered Singapore Marathon and the Chengdu Marathon, which is in China, are both candidate races aiming to become the next Abbott World Marathon Majors. There is a long-term assessment period, and the races must pass a stringent set of criteria multiple times before they can be inducted into the majors. Do you guys know what those two races share in common?
They're both less than 10 years old.
They're both Wanda races. So wait, are we selecting the best marathons in the world, or are we just selecting Wanda pays a bunch of money and they get to join the World Marathon Majors? So this is just from my preliminary work. The Chengdu race, I think, is owned by Wanda, or at least they run it. And the Singapore, a lot of these races, are like nonprofits or a local group might own them. But Wanda runs that race. So you can run the race and not actually own it. So like Wanda could never own New York City Marathon, but they could pay to sponsor it or that sort of thing. So I think that's a sort of interesting thing. Where are we going with the sport? Is the World Marathon Majors? You're taking Chinese money. What does that mean?
Yeah, everyone in the streets are running for cancer research and to help the world. And yet at the same time, you're supporting human rights abuses in China. Run New York and torture Muslims in China.
Wow, we just have the Let's Run equivalent of the Daryl Morey tweet, and the running world is going to light itself on fire now the next few weeks.
I think that's a bit simplistic, right? Robert, it's like one Chinese company, but if you're successful in China, you're going to be very tied to the government. But it just sort of is interesting things. And with companies, I'd never thought Wanda sponsoring the marathons, never thought much about it. Oh, wait, Wanda. Now we're learning more what Wanda is. Well, let's take the majors in another sport, right? If you're in tennis, did the tennis majors decide, hey, we're going to take a bunch of money from a Chinese company, and then, oh, wait, we're going to expand possibly into companies owned by the companies paying to sponsor us? It's just an interesting thing. And I'm sort of going off on this a little bit early, but it's like, wait, are these just the greatest marathons in the world, or are there more commercial interests here involved? And it's interesting because London, Boston, New York, they've had this huge history that these other races really don't have.
I might sound like a biased Westerner here, but are we really going to make the Chengdu Marathon one of the most prestigious marathons in the world? I think it's the World Marathon Majors. I think six is plenty for the World Marathon Majors. Any more, you're just diluting what it means to be that's a value. To me, the World Marathon Majors is great. It's a great system of races. I like how they're all cooperating. I like how there's a series. But there's prestige that comes with winning a major. And the more majors you add, the less prestige there's going to be.
And as we're seeing in New York, there's only so many truly elite runners to go around. So you're going to be totally diluted. But listen, World Marathon Major people, Mr. Wanda, is that his name?
No, it's not.
This is what I said before. And I've said this all along. But these races, this is what happened when Competitor Group bought all these races in America. We don't need a hedge fund running these races. These races need to be owned by nonprofits. They need to be for the city. They need to be for promoting fitness and the sport of running, not for lining somebody's back pocket. If he's the second richest man in China, please turn these races to a nonprofit status. You have billions of dollars. You don't need to make an extra 2 or 3 million on each race. Just do it for the sport. Do it for fitness. Let's common sense here. We don't need to be shutting down a city to benefit some guy who's already got billions of dollars. This is because what you see here, I'm actually glad though that he's wants to be World Marathon Majors, because normally what you see when these hedge funds get is they slash the elite budget. Look at that rock and roll. Look at the Philadelphia half marathon now. It's going to soon be an amateur race. These races, they don't care about the pros. They don't care about the elite sports. So I'm very thrilled that he is into that. But I just don't want profit being the number one criteria here for these races.
Well, it is sort of interesting. So the head of Wanda, his name is Wang Jianlin. Jianlin. Also, there was some criticism, I feel like, when the World Marathon Majors sort of formed together. They formed essentially a cartel, right? And said, look, we're the greatest marathons. And I think some of the criticism then at the time was like, wait, so you guys just are the self-anointed best marathons, which I think they actually were. But then it's like, wait, now you guys can just sit on your laurels.
Well, Dubai.
Rest on your name and shut everybody out. So let's say some Chinese company or some Chinese race started putting tens of millions of dollars in it and got the best fields. Some person in China might say, hey, this is unfair. You guys aren't the majors. You're not the best anymore. So why should you guys get to say you're the World Marathon Major? So it's interesting. Instead of just sitting on being the top marathons and keeping a close cartel, they decided to take sort of outside money. But it seems like also with that, they then decided to go, we're expanding into races tied to this partner. I think at this point we need to look into it more, but it's like, I, at least till this weekend, had no idea the connection here. I don't think Jonathan or Robert, you did either. It's just sort of interesting.
Well, I've had my proposal before in the past. It's a brilliant proposal. There's only one small flaw to it. If we're expanding to 8, we need to have each race be single sex for the elite race. You have 4 majors like you do in golf and tennis for the men and 4 majors for the women. So New York would only have an elite men's race one year, and then they could have the elite women's race the next year, or maybe you do it for a number of years in a row. Yes, there would be the weird thing of some amateur wins the New York City Marathon women's race when it's not the pro race. We'll have to deal with it. That might be exciting, that people understand that it's not a pro race. Plus, by putting all the money in these 4 big races, you would have incredible fields. You wouldn't have some watered down 5th placer like you did this year in some of these races. So you have to do it that way. I feel like that's the way to go if you're going to expand. You can't have 10 majors. That's absurd. 8, and you can do 4 and 4. The other thing these races need to do, again, I know some important people listen to this podcast, and I actually talked to someone who's affiliated with the major who says they're aware of this. I'm like, these races are almost unwatchable. They're finishing on top of each other. You consistently watch the break. Now, I wasn't watching the broadcast this week, so if you're a listener, did they miss both breaks this week? I know they started interviewing the women's race winner right in the middle of when the men's race was really heating up. Thank God they finally went. I did see they finally went to a split screen, but email me, robert@letsrun.com, robert@letsrun.com. Tell me what you thought of the broadcast. But Weldon's wants to interrupt.
Yeah, actually in the media center. So they have the New York setup is sick. I didn't criticize, but I was worried that the second deck of the media center was going away. Well, they repurposed the big finishing tent and rebuilt out a media center overnight. So we had a nice setup area. And then the new addition this year, and I'm sure this is where some of the money went from the second deck, was they had a huge glass enclosed tent just like 50 meters past the finish. I mean, that's got to be the best place to watch a race ever. So I assume that was like the super VIP tent. So that was money well spent. I mean, great job, New York. They always seem to amaze me with some of the stuff they come up with. It's just so well run. And then this media tent that's put up and just all this other stuff. But in the media tent, we have like 8 screens. They're showing the international feed, the ABC feed. And I started noticing it because we had switched between feeds. The ABC feed, look, you guys, ESPN feed, you guys you're missing it. The coverage was not nearly as good as the international feed. Split screen is your friend. The wheelchair ends and they go to a wheelchair interview and they don't show either of the 2 races going on. Whereas the international feed was showing both races. And then Joyciline Jepkosgei finishes. They go interview her. The men's race is breaking. She's not a good interview. This audio was not good. They stuck with that. I'm like, oh, this is a disaster. And I look up at the international feed. It's meanwhile going split screen or showing the men's race actually only at that point. And finally, the interview was so bad they had to split screen it. But they should be going split screen the whole time. Split screen is your friend. Split screen on the international feed is one of my big winners this week.
Again, the one race needs to finish when the other race ideally would be about halfway, no later than 30K. Now, I talked to someone who's like, well, we can't shut down the roads that long. I'm like, you already do. You start the wheelchair runners significantly before everybody else. And someone's like, well, we can't have the regular runners go because the wheelchair runners would run them over. I'm like, you could have make the wheelchair runners stay to one side, start them 100 yards back or 100 yards ahead. You could figure it out so the wheelchair runners wouldn't plow over everybody.
Yeah, just start the wheelchair runners. The wheelchair runners start early, right? Just start the elite runners right after the wheelchair runners. Like instead of having like a 20-minute gap, I think it was like a 20 or 30-minute gap in New York this year. Just move the women to right behind them. The wheelchair runners will take off immediately. They'll be out. You're never going to catch the wheelchair runners.
I feel like we might get in trouble for using the word wheelchair runner.
Yeah, sorry, wheelchair runners, wheelchair athletes. Sorry, Robert. I blame Robert. He got me saying that word.
And the other thing is, if you want more time, you start the elite men first. That gives you an extra 15 minutes because they run faster, than the women. So I've heard that one of the majors may be doing that. They may be starting the elite men first next year to give them the extra time because they're so apparently I do have good news, folks. Apparently, one of the majors is actually aware of the fact that their TV product is terrible. Speaking of TV, guys, again, we didn't watch much of it, but do we have any comments? Readers, write in. What did you think of Shalane Flanagan's debut?
Wait.
On the national broadcast.
Say her name again, Robert.
Shalane Flanagan. I said Shalane, but Shalane.
Johnny's from Texas. We can't really pronounce words. He doesn't have the accent, but Shalane Flanagan.
He went to Princeton. What do you want to say? You're from Texas? That's an excuse. That's not an excuse for not speaking properly.
John, we weren't born in the Northeast. We just
Neither was I.
They just don't roll off our tongue like they did for you. These difficult Boston words. In Texas, it's Shalane Flanagan.
Oh, actually, okay. I could.
And John, we keep giving John chances to just go off on political tangents. That's what these young journalists are doing these days. John stayed quiet on the China issue. He stayed quiet on the Trump Tower issue earlier.
I just don't want to say something stupid without having thought it out properly.
I'm going to bring Trump back into it, John.
All right.
Did you guys hear that Trump went to the UFC fight on, I think it was Saturday night in New York City?
Yeah, it was at Madison Square Garden. I heard about it.
So everyone was pissed off in New York because the marathon, the traffic's already bad, and then the president came in town. Did you guys hear where he sat?
No.
He sat in the second row, like no box. Like, I'm surprised Secret Service let that go. But then it got me thinking. I got upset. If Trump could go to the UFC, why wouldn't he go to he could have gone to the marathon. He could have been in the little VIP box, the little glass box. It would have been perfect for the president. But John, like shit would have hit the fan, right? If he came to that. I think the marathon crowd might be a little more liberal than the UFC crowd, or New Yorkers show that they can support a president in New York. You don't have to agree with his policies, right? What would have happened if Trump had been at the New York City Marathon finish?
I think the New York City Marathon crowd is, and the runners in the New York City Marathon, that's about as liberal as you're going to get for a sporting event. I think he would have been booed heavily.
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of rich runners, though, John. Rich people like to vote for their pocketbook. But yes, significantly more liberal than the UFC. I am pleased that Trump did not show up at the New York City Marathon. It would have been a disaster for me and John, because John and I both took our luggage to the media center so we could hop on the bus to go to the Ravens game afterwards. And there's no way they would have taken us a huge bag in. We probably been put in jail. So.
And also, one thing I've learned from being in New York, there's a whole nother level of rich here. So they're so rich here, they don't think they have to worry about the pocketbooks. A lot of these hedge fund guys and private equity guys, and I assume some of them might have been in the glass box at the finish. But, oh, man, the glass box was awesome. We watched the 5K from there. I just thought it was a really cool addition to have just put that there, and you can give people a better seat of the finish. It was pretty cool.
I agree. I thought that was a cool setup as well.
Well, most people aren't watching the race in person. They're watching on TV. So, again, if you have comments and watch the broadcast, Robert at letsrun.com. Every year I claim I'm going to go back and watch the whole thing from start to finish and write the race directors a detailed free consulting. And every year I don't do it. Maybe this is the year. The only thing I noticed, because they finally at the end of the race, is that they were focusing on the women's race at the, because that was the first race to finish. So that was the one we kind of had on. And the one thing that I did notice was they kept talking about how Jepkosgei was struggling and her form looked terrible. This was Shalane saying this. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's switching form because she's going faster. Like she's sprinting it in. And then that ended up being, Weldon noticed it. It was like, you had the split, Weldon. That was her fastest mile of the race, right?
Yeah. That was one thing I would always tell the announcers to look at is they have mile by mile splits in New York online. It's amazing. But they were saying, oh, she looks like she's not doing well here. And then I looked at the split. The split just came up for mile 25 or 26, and she put 13 seconds on Katani on that mile. And I'm like, I don't give a shit what her face looks like. She just ran 13 seconds faster than the one behind her. So look at that. I can link to a thread. There was a thread about Flanagan's debut. Some people are asking whether, one, it's her first real race. She did the breaking 2 or the Ineos 159.
I thought she did Boston, too. Didn't she do Boston this
year? I feel
like
she'd done one before, too, but they made it sound like it was her second race. I think you're right, John. Whether she's better or Paula Radcliffe,
I heard when they went to Radcliffe a couple times, Radcliffe was riding a motorcycle. I thought Radcliffe was amazing. Like they would kind of throw Radcliffe a generic question, and once or twice Radcliffe actually disagreed. Like they kind of handed her softball, and Radcliffe went in a totally different direction. She's like, well, actually, I don't think that at all. I think based on looking at it, she was really using her eyes accurately to describe what she was seeing instead of sort of going with this. I think a lot of times an announcer has a preconceived notion they're trying to build drama, like, oh, she's catering when she's actually not, or whatever. So, I just think that these broadcasts could be done a lot better. My number one suggestion would be just to always show the halfway. I would like to see the halfway and the mile by mile splits. Put them up on the screen. On ESPN, they have that annoying top 20 order. Anybody who wants to see the top 20, come on. They can get an app out on their phone. What I would like to see is the mile by mile splits.
Devil's advocate.
Like the way London does it.
If they fix the broadcast, what are we going to have to talk about the next week? And what are people going to have to complain about on Twitter as the race is going on? This is a time-honored tradition of being a diehard track and field fan is complaining about major marathon broadcasts. If they fix that, they're taking that away from us.
Well, clearly the international feed was listening. They had some split screen, which is cool. So shout out to Julie Benson, right? Dallas Cowboys fan as well. So she was on that broadcast. And actually, speaking of Paula Radcliffe, one more thing about Paula Radcliffe, John. We saw her at this Fourth Frontier event, kind of caught up with her briefly. And Paula was very excited because she's never been on the lead truck for the men. She was in the motorcycle for the men. She's like, I never followed the men's race. I always do the women's. So that was kind of exciting for her. And then we were kind of joking with her, like, Paula, you need to speak out against the shoes. They can put an asterisk by them and you can keep your world record. And she was pretty cool about it. Nike's her sponsor. And she didn't say anything about them sponsoring her, but she's like, look, technology's always changed. The shoes are getting better. If it can help people, run faster or not get injured, why should we be against it?
I'm all for the new technology as long as everyone has access to it. What they did in 2016 was wrong. It was the equivalent of mechanical doping, and it needs to be disqualified. Although, speaking of who had a bad week, I will admit that I had a bad week in the sense of the Vaporflies did not win the women's race. Top two women were both Adidas. But I have a tweet here from @Rolos, ROLOWS _13. He's a Japanese Twitter account. This guy has an amazing tweet, and he has the top three finishers of all of the World Marathon Majors this year, including the World Championship. So all 7 races. Does not have Dubai. Dubai is not technically a major. But this is amazing. Listeners at home, I've already asked Weldon and John. They've seen this. So I want you, as you're driving in your car right now, as you're running.
Don't close your eyes. Don't close
your eyes as you're doing it. But I want you to take a brief pause. Of the 21 top three finishers in the men's field at the World Marathon Majors this year, guess how many of them were wearing the Nike Vaporfly 4% or some version of that, next percent, some version of the Nike Vaporfly? Come on, go ahead and guess. Of the 21. Okay, here's the answer. The answer is 19. That's over 90%. I don't want to hear that Nike sponsors most pros. They don't sponsor 90% of the top pros. For the women, it was slightly less. It was 17 of 21. That's over 80%. So that's like a huge advantage. Now, obviously, we're kind of looking for the advantage. And then I was talking to an intern, this woman, some soon-to-be college students interning at the New York Times. She was asking me about the shoes. She's like, well, if someone can win without the Nike shoes, doesn't that mean that they're not an advantage? I'm like, no, it doesn't mean that at all. But it's just what they did in 2016 was wrong, and those races need to be validated.
Again, Robert trying to die on the stupidest hill in running arguments. But
it's not stupid at all, John. It's not stupid at all. I'm going to write the NWF this week and see if they're going to if they'll consider this. And
please don't. I guess you are standing up for principle. I totally agree. It was an unfair advantage at the Olympics, and it, in my reading, violated the rule. It said shoes should not give an unfair advantage. And if you come up with a new technology that's completely different than anything else it had before, purposely do not release it so no one else can run at it and give it to your athletes, that's an unfair advantage.
It's not an unfair advantage now because they have the right to buy it if they want to. Now, one thing is, I think that the Adidas Boost perhaps was an unfair advantage for the Adidas athletes. Back 5-10 years ago, we had Jeffrey Mutai, Emmanuel Mutai, all these guys just dominating race after race. Adidas couldn't win a race if they had. Nike couldn't win a marathon if they had to. but we weren't aware of that. I actually was talking to this person about this. It's like, so yeah, maybe that was against the rules too. But like, I would say some of this is debatable. It's like pass interference. If you're kind of hand checking, okay, that might be pass interference. Maybe not. It's debatable. Yes, all shoes at some level, you're trying to get around this rule and give someone an unfair advantage, I guess. So yes, everyone was trying to cheat, but this was the equivalent of tackling somebody this is equivalent of the New Orleans pass interference play in that game last year. When you tackle somebody, it's a flag and you throw it up.
Well, actually, the refs don't seem to know that this year if we've been watching NFL games, Robert. But I digress. That's a different hot take.
I apologize to the Giants fans for the pass interference that wasn't called. I agree it should have been called. John, thank you for Michael Bennett. He was a former Patriot. He's very good for the Cowboys. And interesting, John, here's another chance for you to go off. Bennett wouldn't come out. When he was on the Patriots, he didn't come out for the national anthem. When he's on the Cowboys, he went and stood with his teammates for the national anthem. John, what do you think of that?
I mean, not knowing anything else about it, it sounds like he's kowtowing to Jerry Jones.
A Cowboy has never kneeled for the anthem or stayed in the locker room.
Well, he'd probably be cut. And Bennett's also been in trouble because he lied about the Las Vegas police shooting thing. So
I mean, I think Jerry in the past would cut them, but what if Bennett keeps getting really good and then like game 16?
Yeah, I think you'd keep him. I mean, they kept Greg Hardy on the roster, and that guy was a monster. So
we're America's team for a reason, John. America's team.
There's a stick to the racing, stick to the running crowd, and I'm trying to support them. They email me all the time. So let's talk a little bit about these shoes. The other shoes now, like Saucony has their version of the Vaporfly. Adidas is coming out with one. Now, John, I think it was John that has the thing. We're about to publish this. We haven't put it up in the article, but there's a theory as to why these shoes are not out on the market yet. And I thought one of you guys got the exclusive, or was it Weldon that got it? Please share with the visitors.
Yeah, so I spoke to someone. Let's call this person a well-connected source within the running shoe industry. And their theory, is just a theory, was that the reason why these companies are giving these athletes prototypes to race in rather than just releasing them to the public is that these prototypes are actually using copyrighted Nike technology. And by releasing to the public, Nike will be able to obtain these shoes, prove that they're infringing upon their copyright, and sue them. But by just giving them to the elite athletes, they don't infringe the copyright, or it's impossible to prove they infringe the copyright, but the athletes get the performance boost to put them on level footing with the Nike shoes.
Okay, a couple of things. First of all, it's a patent, not a copyright, but that's just...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
I mean, Nike keeps coming out with prototypes as well, like Kipchoge, Ronan prototypes. So I think companies do prototypes all the time, but I think essentially they were saying some of these companies never intend to come out with the shoe. Like Adidas is coming out with the shoe. It's called the Adizero Pro, right? Is that right, John?
Yeah. Whereas like Des Linden, she wore prototypes to win the Boston Marathon in 2018.
Right.
And to my knowledge, that shoe still has not been released publicly.
So some of the thinking is if some of these prototypes, that there's never an intention for them to actually come out with a commercial shoe. And in that case, that they're worried about a possible patent claim, because I guess Nike's been very broad in what it's trying to patent. And some, insiders also had this debate. Well, like swimming, certain stuff you just can't patent. If you want to make it raceable, you can't patent certain technology. That would be one way you could go, but I doubt the IWF goes that way. All right, we did the women's marathon rankings for the U.S.
Wait a second, hold on. I got two more things, quick hits on New York, and then we'll move on
wait.
to trials.
No, I need to come in on the shoes here. One last thing.
Oh my god.
So John doesn't like the shoe talk. But this is amazing.
We talk about the shoes every fucking week. I mean, I'm sorry for dropping the F-bomb there, but
no one's doing anything about it. So I learned this in the 2016 Olympics, a few weeks before the Olympics. Brooks tweeted out a picture of Des Linden's shoe that she was going to race in. It was their basic running shoe. They changed the upper, put like Des on it, a USA flag or something like that. Probably try to get some free marketing when you're not allowed to market or whatever. And someone noticed that at the IOC or IAAF. And they contacted them and said, you cannot race in this shoe. It is not available to all. You cannot race in it. So they made Des Linden change her shoe for the 2016 Olympics. Yet all six medalists, or at least was it all six? Was the women included? I'm not sure if all three women's medalists, but all three men's medalists were able to wear a shoe that's 4% better than the other shoe and is not commercially available. that's wrong, it's mechanical doping, and those medals need to be stripped.
Whoa, if that is true, you need to write an article on that, and I want to see that. This is the journalism I will support. I've never heard that story. You need to get to the bottom of that and write an article, and that's just pretty straightforward.
I was told that by somebody who would know last week. I'll try to see if I can get it.
Wow.
For attribution.
That's pretty good. Now, John, wherever you want to go, the floor is yours.
No, I was there when Robert heard this story, and certainly something that we should follow up on. But
see, this is like the regular doping stories. We're tired of hearing about it. These are big stories. We didn't even realize I have an exclusive.
Is this when I was late to the 5K?
No, this was. I don't even know if I want to say exactly where it happened because it might give a clue. But it Weldon, you were not present in this at that exact moment. I don't think.
But also being late for a 5K, you can't be too late. I was there before the race was over, and I was watching on my USATF stream. So, I was there before the finish. It's like for major races, you want to be there when the national anthem is sung. So usually I time it. Usually it's about halfway through the anthem I arrive. For a 5K, you can't actually see them. You need to have a way to watch it, and you need to get there before it ends.
He was watching better than we were on his phone, John. He was listening to Bill Spalding. We were kind of just listening to some random tape. But speaking of the 5K, my biggest loser of the week, Andy Bear. This is the man that always finishes fourth at USA in the steeplechase. This year with Evan Jager, he moves up to third. But if Jager comes back, he's likely slide for fourth this year. But now we can kiss Mr. Bear's Olympic chances going because the winner of the men's 5,000 at the USA Championships, and this has not gotten much traction. I tried to hype this up. Is Anthony Rotich, the former 4-time NCAA champion at UTEP, 3 times in the steeple, 1 time in the mile. Remember, when he won that mile, he beat the likes of Johnny Gregorek, Lowy Lang, some pretty good people. He is now a U.S. citizen. He wins the road 5K. And then I talked to Scott Simmons, and I couldn't believe it. I said, well, you've already got a couple other good steeplechasers. You got Stanley Kebenet and Hillary Bohr, who are both top 10 in the world this year. I said, how does he compare to them? And he didn't directly answer that question, but the way he answered it, it sounded like he may think he's better than them, Rotich is, because he says, I really think this is a guy that can medal on the world stage. And he did when he said that to me, he elaborated. It didn't sound like he was limiting to just the steeple. He acts like this guy's got real speed and can medal potentially in a 5,000 or even a 1,500.
1,500, yeah, all right, Robert. I mean, he's going to medal in a 1,500 at Worlds. I'm sorry, that's one of the most ridiculous things you ever said.
Well, okay, John. Let's look up the results here for Anthony Rotich at the. How much did Johnny Gregorek not make a world championship final? I mean, is that true?
Yeah, he wasn't even close to medaling. Anthony Rotich, he have the 3:42 1,500 PB and 3:59 1,500 mile personal best. This guy is going to medal at a world championships. I mean, Robert, I can't believe this is the most I've ever seen anyone get carried away by some road race result in November. And now you're saying this guy, all right, here's his steeplechase progression. He set his PR of 8:21 in 2013. Since then, he's gone 8:30, 8:33, 8:27, 8:27, 8:34. Andy Bear just ran 8:12 in the World Championship final. I mean, the idea that you're just writing off Bear and saying that Rotich, he's the guy because I had a conversation with his coach is absurd.
John, you got to realize what was going on. Robert, because of the baby, which is now 2 years old, hasn't been to a lot of meets recently. So he actually talked to Scott Simmons and was so excited that Scott Simmons sort of gave him a scoop that it's just been amplified. So coaches, agents, if you really want to get something played up, just leak it to Robert and he'll blow it out of the water. But should we have a new segment for the podcast? We'll have people vote. We'll kind of do this in the off season. And each week, one of us gets voted off and they're off the podcast the next week. I mean, I guess then it'd be hard because then we'd only have 2 guys on next week and one guy would get voted off.
It was true. I felt like I hadn't been at an event and actually done a real interview. And maybe since the iPhone was invented, I wasn't sure how to do the interview. But what do you mean? So do you think Scott was just playing me to try to get Rotich's sponsorship or something?
I think Scott thinks very highly of his guys, but sometimes he might overhype them a little bit. And I think that I just think, Robert, sometimes you have a tendency to overhype guys. We were talking about one guy when we were in New York, Ben Sorrell. You proclaimed him the next great American distance runner back in 2014.
If he didn't have the Graves' disease or whatever it was, he would be.
Did you or did you not say that Anthony Rotich could possibly medal in a 1,500 at the World Championships of the Olympics?
Scott Simmons implied that he could win in other medal in an event besides the steeplechase. The most likely one would be the 5,000, I guess, but the 1,500? What do you mean?
1,500 is absurd.
Come on, man.
Why is it absurd? He smoked Mac Fleet. He smoked Johnny Gregorek. He beat Gregorek by 1.6 seconds. Johnny
He beat
Gregorek.
Mac Fleet in a race in 2014.
Well, Mac Fleet's no good now.
And he beat these guys in the race 5 years ago, and you think that means they can medal at Worlds? It's ludicrous.
Robert, this is good, though. Finally, John is bringing down Johnny Gregorek. Well, usually we hear about Johnny Gregorek, world's greatest 1,500 meter runner, because John beat him once in a race in high school.
He wiped the floor of a guy who's now a 349 miler. Wiped the floor of him
5 years ago. Who cares?
Now he's back to training. And I asked Scott about this. He said the training wasn't very high at their level. It was a collegiate training. Now they're doing pro training.
All right, can we keep the subject going? And
John, how much you want to bet right now? I'll bet you. How much money do you want to bet right now, straight up? Anthony Rotich makes the U.S. Olympic team.
Oh, the Olympic team? No, I mean, I think he could. That's possible. I'm not saying to write Andy Bear off. What are you giving? I'm trying to think.
He's got to be one of the top 10 guys in the world because they already got Jaeger, you got Bohr, and you got Kebany. He's got to be one of the three top 10 guys in the world to make that Olympic team.
All right, let's say even odds, $20 bet.
Yeah.
If he makes the Olympic team, not saying he doesn't have to. If he DNSs due to injury or whatever, but if he makes the Olympic team,
no, you can get. I'll take all the DNSs and everything.
So he has to run. He has to run at the Olympic Games.
No, he doesn't.
No, he doesn't.
Oh no, yeah. If he's top 3 at the trials, he's on the team.
But what if he's top 3 at the trials and he doesn't have the standard?
That's not going to happen. If he's top 3 at the trials, I win. He will finish top 3 at the trials. I want that bet now.
But he'll finish top 3 in the trials. All right, yes. $20.
Take you. You guys heard it here first. I'm going out on a limb. Talent doesn't go away. Remember that, folks.
Okay. One more quick take out of New York that I've got here. Women's race. Gerda Steyn. All right. Ultramarathon extraordinaire from South Africa. Props to Robert and Weldon for bringing this up because initially I didn't want to talk about it, but it's actually really impressive. This year, she has won the Comrades and Two Oceans Marathon. She finished 11th in New York in 2:27, getting the Olympic standard. Really, really impressive stuff. I didn't think it was that great, and then I looked into the details. It's actually really awesome. I give full credit to her.
Okay, if you guys heard John's voice crack there, it's because Robert and I started having heart attacks on the camera, laughing, waving at him. John presents it as one thing he wants to talk about. Robert wanted to talk about it. I think this should be an automatic suspension for the podcast next time. Well,
a suspension? I think John should be fired for a week or suspended without pay. This is the most dishonest person. These young kids will just steal stuff without attribution.
You guys weren't even going to mention her. We're an hour and a half into the podcast. We haven't said her name.
Right before the podcast, I saw a tweet from David Monty talking about Gerda Steyn. She was 11th in New York in 2:27. I didn't even know she ran, but she had this picture of how great she left New York. So I thought, well, maybe they brought her in so she could run next year. Then I see she gets 2:27. And John says, why would I give an F about some ultra runner running New York? And then he's like, oh, wait, she ran Comrades and Two Oceans and 2:27. Oh, that's actually pretty good. And then he leads the podcast with it. Pathetic.
No, and leading the podcast. You guys, we're 80 minutes into the podcast. You haven't said her name at all. I figure I better bring her up or she's not going to get mentioned. I'm just trying to do my job. And then you guys are like, oh, I didn't give you guys credit. All right, well, now I'm giving you credit. You guys brought it to my attention. Great job. Great job, Gerda. Really impressive stuff. I mean, winning Comrades and Two Oceans, those are big-time marathons. And then to go to run 2:27 in New York, that's fantastic.
Wow. It's paying off. Hoka's sponsorship of her ultra stuff is paying off. John now is ultra running expert. John wasn't going to even ever talk about ultras, and now he's bringing it up on podcast 6 months later.
All right. Shall we move on to the discussion? You know, it's taken us a long, long time to get there, but the U.S. Olympic trials, the men, how we're looking, because, you know, as we said, we've got like basically Dubai, Fukuoka, some of these other marathons Americans aren't going to run. The next big American marathon is the trials in Atlanta. And I'm just going to break down. I'm going to go into the tiers again. So I think we have one guy at the very top, and here's Alberto Salazar mention of the week. It's taken a while to get to it, but Galen Rupp, clearly he's the guy to beat. He's the heavy favorite. After that, I think you have a tier of Leonard Korir, Scott Fauble, Jared Ward. I think two of those three guys, I think I give each of those guys a 50% chance to make the team. And you're going to say, I say Rupp's probably close to 90. And then everyone else, the chance of everyone else, add them up, you have to get 300% out of that. So Anyway, and then after that, there's a huge. We had 10 guys break 212 in Chicago. I think all of those guys, well, at least one of them has a pretty good shot to do something at the trials. You have the old guard of Abdi Abdirahman, Bernard Lagat, Dathan Ritzenhein. They're all super talented. They've made 12 Olympic teams between them. Ritz is going to be 37 on the day of the trials. Abdi's going to be 43, and Lagat will be 45. And it's amazing we're even contemplating that those last two guys could have a shot at the team. And then you've got a huge pack of other guys as well. You go Chris Derrick, someone like him. Shadrach Biwat, he had a rough year this year, but I think he's piled up a ton of top 10s in majors. I think Shadrach has a really a good shot to be in the mix if he can get back to his level of 2017, 2018. You guys, how do you see the men's trial shaping up?
Well, and John's going to be publishing this article on Let's Run. Okay, I agree with you that Rupp is a tier one. I mean, he's way ahead of everybody. He's a cut above. You said cut above. I'd say he's 2 cuts above. And you don't consider him a lock. I consider him a lock. I mean, I think if he even shows – yes, his build-up for Chicago didn't go well. But I feel like if he shows up in the same fitness that he did for Chicago, if that was the trials, he would have gutted through that race and made top 3. He went out way faster than the guys. He was still way ahead of everyone at Chicago. Well, I guess we do have 3 decent – although I guess Kamworor, Fable, and Ward still weren't there. So, yeah, there's a tiny chance that if he's in the same fitness.
There are some injury concerns. He had Achilles surgery.
I think with the extra 5 months, his Achilles should be feeling a lot better because he gets a lot better after 1 year. Your next tier, you have Leonard Career, Scott Fable, and Jared Ward. I disagree with that. I put Career at a spot slightly ahead of Jared Ward and Scott Fable. In this piece that is yet to be published, you say a 207.55 at Amsterdam is the equivalent of a 209 in Boston. I don't agree with that. Boston is downhill. They had a tailwind this year. I think Career went out significantly faster. He's significantly better at those guys at the 10K, 27:20, right, John?
Yeah.
59 minutes in the half marathon. He is a better runner than those guys. Yes, he's not as accomplished as them at the marathon, but he's a step above in terms of talent. And I have more confidence in him making the team. I would put him at above 50%. I would say like 60, 65. And then I think Fable and Ward are clearly the next tier. And then I wasn't sure after that, John. You have the old guard, Abdi, Lagat, and Ritz. Are those guys ahead of the 211, 210 tier in Chicago, or is about the same?
No, I wouldn't necessarily say they're ahead. I think they're all sort of the 210, 211 guys in Chicago are pretty close to them. Like Lagat, I'm amazed at what Lagat did, but 212, 10 in Gold Coast. I mean, that's not, if you just take out the fact that he's 45 or 44 and that he's coming from this ridiculous middle distance background, it's not so, like if some random American who wasn't named Bernard Lagat ran 212 in Gold Coast, people wouldn't be, wetting their pants over it. So I think he's good, but I wouldn't necessarily. I think Abdi, honestly, I'm more impressed by what Abdi did in New York. I mean, running 211 on a tough course there, that really puts him firmly in the mix.
Thank you, John. No one's giving Abdi any credit, and this is nuts. He ran 211.34 at age 42 in New York. This wasn't some pancake flat course. Now, granted, he maybe had the shoes, but he was only, we're like singing the praises of Jared Ward. He was 49 seconds behind Jared Ward in New York. Now, obviously, Jared Ward beat him, but Abdi's going to be, it's just nuts. Lagat's going to be 45 at the Olympic trials. Abdi's going to be 43. Like, I don't know, maybe because I'm 46. Like, I beat Abdi in a race. Like, it's nuts that these guys can do this. I don't know if that means just shows like maybe the other guy should be running way faster or like that what people can do as they age these days. But I'm just sort of baffled. Like I ran, John, at the media race, we ran the media race at Worlds and I ran a half marathon. I ran 2:31. Like I couldn't keep up with these guys for a full marathon for half a mile.
You ran an 800 and 2:31. Well done.
What did I say?
I thought you said half marathon.
Oh, half. Yeah. I ran a 2:31, 800 meters. So it's just nuts. Lagat, no, not making the team. That course won't suit him. 212 isn't that impressive. Abdi, I would have said no way in hell until now. But if he makes this, he'll be the first guy ever to make 5 Olympic teams on the track for America. So that would be pretty cool. But I think after this run, you have to give him a chance. Like he hasn't been running that well, but like he's 45 seconds behind everyone's saying is a tier 1 guy. So what a run by Abdi. I mean, if this is it for him, amazing that he could put this together. I just feel like for whatever reason, he wasn't the first American. The media didn't see him afterwards in New York, but he didn't get the praise he would do. Like, people were going nuts about Lagat last year in New York. He didn't even, ran like 215 or something, 216, 218. Like, this is crazy.
God, the longest praise of Abdi I've ever seen. Let me interrupt here. Yes, he was amazing. And I want to praise him. That's actually what I wanted to say, but I'm not sure why it took Weldon so long to praise him there. John and I are about to fall off the video camera because he kept talking. Anyways, that's equivalent to like a 210. I would put Abdi's performance this weekend. It blew my mind. I've written him off. I put him ahead of all those guys in Chicago who are running 210s to 212s. A 211 in New York is probably about a 210 flat. So I put him just behind Ward. And then, yes, Lagat's not going to make this team. No way. Ritz, I wouldn't rule him out. Again, it's a talent level. The same reason why I'm putting Abdi up there. Also, he's running like the equivalent of a 210 flat in a flat course, but also his talent level is so higher. That's the same reason why I'm putting Career ahead of everybody else. So you got really one spot, in my opinion.
All right, I just want to say Abdi was amazing in New York this weekend, but I think you guys are just acting like it's a guarantee that he's going to be in the same sort of shape and build up going into the trials. Let's just remember the three marathons he ran before that. He was 26th in Boston earlier this year in 218, and then last year he was DNF in New York, and then 15th in Boston. That was the bad weather year, so but maybe you give him a pass there. But he's going to be 43 going into the trials. You can't just take it as a given that everything's going to go well and he's going to be healthy and all that stuff. I know he ran great in New York. If he's in the same kind of shape of the trials, he'll be in the mix. I just think it's once you get up there at that age, it's not a given.
Totally agree with you. I'll look at the screen next time when I talk about Abdi because I didn't see you guys waving at me. But I don't think he'll make the team, but I'm just saying this run I don't think got enough credit for what it was. It was pretty amazing.
We don't want Weldon to turn into the guy that talks about his career. And that's one of the things, like when Shalane or someone, we know you ran. We don't need to hear you talk about like every race and what it was like. They always would say, what did it feel like to do this? We don't need to hear every time what it felt like. People know what it feels like to run mile 12 of a marathon.
I don't know. Sometimes I'm interested in hearing what.
No, sometimes I am, but not.
I hate it when people do it. So if that's what I said with the 230, that was just me being a 45-year-old guy. For me, also, like his age just bears in because I competed against this guy. That was 16 years ago? Holy crap. The fact that he could just do this, I just want to wait till you're my age, John. Some guy running this time, you'd be like, holy shit, unbelievable.
Two things here. I'm going to give praise to both of you. First of all, when John spent the night at my house after the Ravens game, Ravens beat down of his Steelers, I did well.
Patriots. I mean, come on, man.
Yes. When John's at my house, I did well to do the proper Let'sRun.com education. I put on the Team USA sweatshirt, all white, that you got to wear to the Pan American Games where Weldon dropped out representing America for beating Abdi Abdirahman at the USA Championships in 2003. Weldon got to go to Pan Ams. I have the uniform. I wear it around sometimes to act like I was an elite runner. I showed it to John.
I found it amazing that Robert was wearing, something endorsing USATF just to walk his dog outside. I found that very amusing.
Well, it's a very old school jacket. It's that white jacket, Robert.
Yeah.
And also, I owe Abdi one a big time because the only reason I made that Pan American team, he probably would have passed up a spot anyway, was he let up right before the line. So I beat him for fourth place. And I definitely wasn't passing up my spot on a U.S. team because I wasn't making a real one.
Well, it helps me when I describe Weldon as twice as fourth at USA's. If I had to say once fourth and once fifth, it doesn't sound nearly as good. Fourth sounds like he just missed the team. But the other thing I wanted to praise was I want to give out some praise to Jonathan Gault. If you haven't read by the time this podcast is out, this piece will probably be up on Let's Run. You need to read his breakdown analysis of the men's U.S. Women's Olympic 2020 Olympic trials. It has one of the best lines I've ever read in there, John. I was so blown away by this that I'm just amazed by it.
Oh my gosh, Robert, I know what you're talking about. Thank you. I read it this morning. Same thing. Unbelievable line in there. Unbelievable.
What? I don't even remember what I did.
This line is so good. I didn't even think it was true.
Maybe we shouldn't tell people, Robert, and say you have to read the piece and email us.
No.
Tell them. I don't even know what you're talking about here.
So I was born in 1973. To me, the Vietnam War sounds like something that was like millions of years ago. But actually, it went on until 1975. Obviously, I was too young to remember it or anything. John has this piece about how Abdi and Lagat both competed in the 1997 NCAA cross-country championships. I think they were both top 10 in it. And John has this sort of throwaway line that when they were competing then, they were closer to the Vietnam War than they were to the 2020 Olympics. And that blew my mind. I thought that couldn't be right. I was like, well, John must be off by 10 years. John must think the Vietnam was, I don't know. I just thought it was wrong. I had to Google it. I'm like, holy shit, that John's right. Because the Vietnam War seems to me like World War II because it was basically before my lifetime.
Right. Well, I was reading about the Vietnam War, unrelated. It just happened to be reading about it last night. Now, the U.S. they stopped fighting in 1973, but the war itself, didn't actually end until April of 1975 when the North took Saigon. So, and at that point, that was April 30th, 1975, is closer to the 1997 NCAA cross country championships than the 97 NCAA cross country championships are to the 2020 Olympic marathon. You
learn something every day. Actually, I'm now looking on Google. U.S. ground forces pulled out before my birth. It was 1972, and we ceased all bombings on August 15th, 1973. So I was only 3 weeks old. So no wonder I don't remember that. Well, do you remember that? Remember when you were 3 weeks and Walter Cronkite was on?
I think we were still in the incubators at that point.
Oh, yeah, we were born prematurely. We weren't even due to be born until September 7th. So,
wow, you guys were way premature. I'm glad that both of you survived.
So are we.
We had the same chances of surviving as basically Jerry Ward making the Olympic team. We were given 30% chances to live, and we're both here. Jerry Ward gave himself a 35% chance to make the last Olympic team, and now he's here. And guys, we need to shut this podcast off. I think we're over an hour and a half. But one cool story from Pennsylvania, high school ranks. There was a team that got finished third in their district or regionals. They didn't qualify for states, but their 5 best runners all qualified as individuals. They went to states and won the team title. How crazy is that?
Only in America.
Yep. There are where your dreams become reality, athletes of the week.
Yeah, and then let's just give credit. The school does have a name, in fact. It's St. Joseph's Catholic. They're a 1A school, women's school, a girls' school in Pennsylvania. Yeah, totally amazing. And then let's very, very quickly just want to run through a couple of conference NCAA cross-country results because we promised them at the top of the show. Pac-12, that's probably the best college cross-country conference. Colorado men, they regained their title. They won the first 6 editions after joining the conference in 2011. And they lost the last 2 years to Stanford, but they're back on top. Stanford men, who a lot of people, including Robert Johnson, were touting to beat NAU and end their streak of dominance. They were only 3rd in the men's race. Oregon was 2nd. And number 7, Washington, they were only 5th. So really impressive run by the Buffaloes. I mean, at the start of the season, the question was they have 3 studs. Are they going to be able to find a 4-5? Well, Kayshawn Harrison, true freshman, he was 7th in the race. He's really come on. And then, Mott Wetmore found another runner in Alec Horniker, who was essentially a walk. I think he had to try out for the team. Joe Klecker had something interesting about him on Twitter. He's a real diamond in the rough and not a fast guy in high school. So now Colorado is looking like, they got a squad, as they say. Colorado women, not as great on the women's side. They're only 4th. Defending NCAA champions. Obviously, that was a tough conference. Number 2, Stanford. Number 3, Washington. Both finished ahead of them. But they also lost to Utah. I'm kind of baffled. The Utah women, they've beaten Colorado twice this year. They're still ranked. They just came out with a new poll yesterday. Colorado is still ranked ahead of Utah, even though Utah's beaten them twice. So that's kind of weird to me. And then Syracuse, I'll let you guys chime in with just your general impressions in a second. Just want to say Syracuse. All right, Robert, go ahead.
Well, you're missing the big story there. It was number 2 Stanford versus number 3 Washington. Number 2 Stanford just destroyed everybody in the Pac-12 for the women's side. Stanford went 1-2-3, and I know Arkansas was impressive at the SEC meet. They're number 1 in the country, but could we have another Andy Girard situation here? Whereas we get a new coach and Stanford wins it all. I mean, if I'm Arkansas, I'm a little bit worried by that.
Absolutely, and Arkansas has a checkered past at the NCAA meet the last few years, so. Stanford looking good under J.J. Clark in their first year. ACC's Syracuse men get the upset win. Upset, there are a bunch of teams ranked in the 20s. They're all tightly packed, but that's the first win for Brian Bell at a conference meet after taking over Chris Fox. So congrats to him. And they did it without Aiden Tucker, who was one of their top guys.
I was really pumped for Syracuse. I mean, Chris Fox was a sort of a mentor to Weldon, gave him some advice when he was running. Those guys were only an hour away from me when I was coaching at Cornell. I like those guys, and it's hard to take over for someone. It was really good to see Brian get that win. I mean, it was an upset, John. They were only the 6th highest ranked team in that conference. Now, there were 6 teams all ranked between 20 and 30, so there's not much separating those teams. But for them to win that was a big boost for them, and that's going to be a crazy conference in the years to come with UVA and UNC theoretically coming up as well.
Yeah. And then the Big Tens, this is crazy, crazy stat. Wisconsin men won the Big Ten title. That was their 50th Big Ten championship. And the Big Ten's been around a long time. The rest of the schools in the conference right now have combined to win 53. So Wisconsin, this isn't like Iona dominating the MAC every year. This is a real conference, and Wisconsin just year after year gets it done. So that's really impressive by the Badgers. And that was your NCAA cross country minute.
Is that cross country only? They've been 103 Big Ten cross country titles, or is that counting track, John?
No, cross country only.
We should have celebrated the 100.
John, the cross country minute. You left out the HEPs.
All right. Well, we have to go there. All right.
John, we got to know who our core visitor is. Yale did not win the HEPs for the 70-whatever third straight time. We've not won since World War II. But, hey, there's always next year. The Yale men and the Yale women have actually won, so it's got to be one of the longest losing streaks ever. But the guys are young. They can battle back. I want to see a Yale victory in 2 years. I want to see the victory at Van Cortlandt Park. So 2 years, Yale will be your 2021 Heptagonal Games champion.
Well, the men's race was actually really exciting at HEPS. We went to VCP. Perfect day for running. Really beautiful to be out there on the course and watching it all unfold. But Princeton looked like they had it in the bag at 5K. They were coming out of the back hills, and I was thinking, this thing's over. Jason Vigilani, he was all excited, and they faded, and they actually faded all the way to third with Penn getting the win and Harvard taking second. Harvard actually, they could have won this meet. I don't know the last time Harvard won the HEPS was a long time ago, but they could have won this meet if Kieran Tuntavat, who was the defending champion, had finished higher than 11th place. Instead, they wind up just missing out to Penn men. Quakers are the champions.
Man, as a Princeton alum, I gotta admit, they blew that meet. Like, they had that meet in the bag. Like, I don't know, like theoretically from the year, I think they won last year, and they had theoretically returning 4 of the top 6, but 2 of those guys were injured, including Ed Trippus, the really good steeplechaser. But they put 2 freshmen in the top 10. If I told you that they had 2 freshmen in the top 10, you'd think that they would dominate that meet. Or if I told you that Harvard, all they had to do was have Tuntavat finish in the top 10, and they would have won. You would have either one of those teams win. Yet somehow Penn wins. Ex-Princeton coach Steve Dolan gets the job done. That's his second title there, so congrats to him. But I really blame myself because I realized in college, I wasn't on the team. I was hurt. I was the intramural mile champion at Princeton. But I basically bonded with Chris Lear. He was very unhappy there. My friend Victoria, she was kind of unhappy with her running there too. So it wasn't like it was the best running experience for us. So I really rooted for Yale. And Yale was terrible, never won. And then I get to Cornell, and I root for them, obviously. And we never won in cross country, although we won all the time in track. And now, for the first time, I went to the meet. I wore a Cornell shirt and a Princeton sweatshirt. It's the first time I wore anything Princeton ever to a HEPS cross country meet, because I knew that my old boss would not be there, nor would Artie Smith, the women's coach. So I wear that there, and then Princeton blows the meet. So I am the curse. Any team that I root for in a men's HEPS cross country does not win the race.
All right, let's give quick credit. Columbia women taking their 3rd straight Ivy League title. Congrats to them. And I think that's pretty much it, guys. This is a long one, but I think we had some fun today.
It was a wild podcast. I went from, I think, John, you and I went back and forth from loving each other to hating each other. But I'll be richer, $20 richer come June.
And I'm $4 richer thanks to the Dallas Cowboys. John, hopefully you're here next week on the podcast. We can come up with ideas what New York should do for its 50th anniversary. If you guys have any ideas, I think New York should do something special for its 50th anniversary.
And let us know about the intro music, guys. Do you like it? Hate it? Do you have a different suggestion for a tune? Hit us up.
All feedback, you can call 844-LET'S-RUN or go to letsrun.com/podcast. And as always, buy your shoes at letsrun.com/shoes. Until next week,